Now we're going to split off basically, and our central figure is going to be Jacob. Last week we talked about him being alone for the first time in his entire life, how when he was alone, God met him, and the experience that he had there. And we went through and talked about how these are the things that we experience in our own lives. Last week we talked about how these are things we experience in our own life when we come face to face with God. And he continues on his trip, and that's what we're going to look at today, where he starts and begins to build his family. We're going to cover 2 chapters tonight, so we're not going to necessarily do a verse by verse, but we're going to look at the incidents that happened in these 2 chapters, 29 and 30. And so the first point we're going to look at is the well and the woman. The well and the woman. And that's the first 12 verses here. So let's just look there. That Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it, for out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. So we have Jacob coming upon a well, and this is actually the meeting place of the people of Haran. This is where they would all come out and water their flocks and things. And he gets to introduce himself to the people that are there, and he finds out, yes, this is the right place. This is where my family, the family I'm supposed to go to visit. This is where they are, Laban's family. And I made it. I made it. I made it through the trip in the desert. And then he happens to see, at verse 10, it's pointed out to him, it came to pass that when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and I love this, and the sheep. It wasn't just seeing Rachel, it was seeing all the sheep. They really got him excited. Of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And we're going to find out that he is so excited because Rachel is very pretty. At least to him, she was beautiful. And he never loses sight of her his entire life. She is always going to be the apple of his eye. And of course, the lots of sheep also excited him too, because he is a guy that we're going to see later on is going to become a master of raising and breeding sheep and goats and these animals. So Jacob is really in his element. Now, Brother Bob did a great help to me. I think I mentioned that I think the age 40, when I talked about Esau and Jacob and the event, but he showed me, and I agree with him, that really they were more like 77. Esau was 40 when he first got married to the Hittite women. But when Jacob leaves and heads to Haran, he's actually 77. So they were decently up in years. Span of years a little different in those times because they lived to be in the 130s and 40s. So be more like, to us it'd be around the 40, 50 year age idea. But anyway, this woman is beautiful, lots of sheep, and he rolls the stone away and he introduces himself, and she said, yes, I am the daughter of Laban, and he is so excited because after this time of being alone, he has now arrived where he was supposed to be. He's come across the family he's supposed to come across, and not only that, as a bonus, there's a lot of sheep here, and a beautiful girl. So he's really happy. And he meets Laban. And if you get to verse 13 and 14, it says, came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house, And he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, "Surely thou art my bone and my flesh." And he abode with him the space of a month. So he invites Jacob into his home. And at this time begins a dealing, Laban with Jacob. And basically, Laban's going to look at Jacob and say, you know, instead of just hanging around here, the house, for a month, playing video games and things like that, you need to work. Well, I don't think he said playing video games or whatever, but he says, you need to work. You need a job. I'd like to hire you. And so they begin a work on a job. See, and this is family, right? This is the way it works. When you get older, when you get 77, it's about time to think about settling down, starting a family, and working to support them. And so this is what he's Laban's trying to say to him. It's time for you to settle down and get a job, and I'm going to offer you one. And so Laban, because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? And Jacob doesn't realize who he's dealing with. See, Jacob's been a schemer and a supplanter all his life. And when he comes across Laban, Laban is going to be a bigger schemer and dealer, and he's a little older, so he's more experienced at this. And so Jacob's going to meet his match. The schemer and the schemer is the second point, verses 13 to 19. And so Jacob makes a deal. It says, verse 16, Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. Now I was warned by Loretta that as I deal with this tender-eyed thing, she says she has spies in here, and that if I'm bad in talking about Leah being tender-eyed, that I'm going to be in trouble. So I don't know who the spies are in here, but I've got to be careful here as I go to tender-eyed. All right, so trying to figure out what tender-eyed mean. Well, in the Hebrew language, things are not as precise as in Greek. In Greek, if she was ugly, it would say ugly. But it doesn't say that in the Hebrew. It has more the idea of weak. That's what tender means. It means weak or infirm. And eyed deals with more than just the eye. It deals with more the countenance or the face. And, at first I always thought it meant she may be cross-eyed. But I had all kinds of jokes about being cross-eyed, which are terrible and I can't say. But anyway, she was weak in the face. And in comparison to Rachel, she was beautiful. So I guess we got the gist of the matter, right? Everybody can agree? We understand? Right? Okay. And he is not interested in Leah. He's interested in Rachel, has been from the very beginning, and the sheep. Rachel and the sheep. That's Jacob's goal. That's what interests him. And so he says, I'll work for you. You don't have to pay me. Bad deal. Donald Trump would be very disappointed in this young man. But he says, the deal is I will work for you for 7 years, no pay. Just let me marry your daughter at the end of the 7 years. And the great thing, you look at verse 20, and Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had to her. Now that's a testament, right? A testament. And it's true, if you love someone or you're working towards a goal that is worthwhile, that time does fly. But if you have no purpose and if you have no goal and you're not working to achieve anything, then time crawls. Right? Doesn't it? I know time, like today, I had lunch with my granddaughter. That time flies by. Yeah. Now, sometimes the morning at school does not fly by. Some days it just kind of crawls by. And those of us that are teachers, we understand that, right? It's not always pleasant. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is wonderful. So the schemer and the schemer. Now, so he works 7 years to achieve Rachel's as his wife. And I love Laban's attitude here in verse 19. Laban said, "It's better I give her to thee than I should give her to another man. Abide with me." You're probably better than someone else, so yeah, I'll do that. I could. Well, yeah, Laban is a character. So now you had the well and the woman, the schemer and the schemer, and now you have the wife and the wife. Verses 20 to 31. Now we know Jacob, a lot of years go by here, 7 years. Of course, they just flew by for Jacob because he's got this great goal in mind. He's going to get to marry Rachel, the beautiful one that he first saw when he first walked into the area. And Jacob said unto Laban, "Give me my wife," in verse 21, "for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her." And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. It came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for a handmaid. And now we get to verse 25. It's just kind of one of those things in these weddings. Obviously, there's a lot of celebration. They go well into the night, and the women are veiled, and the tent is dark, and this deception, we all know about this deception, right? Now, just think about this. What did Jacob do to his father? His father was blind. He couldn't see. And he pretended to be someone else. And Jacob here, it's in the dark. And he doesn't see. And someone else is pretending to be someone else. And he really gets fooled. I kind of wonder what it was like in the morning. He rolled over, and all of a sudden, ah! Sorry, someone's going to report me to Loretta on that one, aren't they? This is not what I bargained for. This is not what I was thinking. Verse 25, it came to pass in the morning, behold, it was Leah. I love the way the Bible puts it there. Behold, it was Leah. That's what that means. It's Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this that thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me?" Oh, well, Jacob, you got tricked. It finally came around. Long time coming, but it came around. We talked about this in Sunday school. We were in Galatians chapter 6. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever you sow, that shall you also reap. And Pastor Green used to say, when you sow, when you reap, you always reap more than you sow. You reap later than you sow. And so, yeah, it's much later. And he gets a bigger surprise. He's married to someone he didn't even plan on being married to. And Laban said, "Well, it must not be so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn." He could have told him that earlier, but He probably figured he would never marry off Leah. At least it seems to be that's the way he was thinking. And so he says, give her a week. In other words, be her husband for a week, and then I will give you Rachel as your bride if you'll work for me another 7 years. And so Jacob did so. Verse 30, it says, and he went also into Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. Now, the next verses are favor and no favor. Verses 31 to 35. As you see this marriage with 2 women and him starting to build a family, we're going to get all the way up to the 11 of the 12 tribes of Israel in this chapter. So starting at verse 31 and then going into chapter 30, you're going to see favor and no favor. You see here that Leah knows that she is not favored. I mean, she knows she was not the one. And never was the number one. She's the number one wife. She's the first married. But she's never going to be the number one in the heart of her husband. But she's always going to try to get that spot. How frustrating, right? To try to get the spot that someone else is holding. How can I get the favor of my husband, who favors another? This is a terrible situation to be in. But it reminded me, as you look at this, it's very similar to the illustration Paul uses, again in Galatians, where we just were, about Ishmael and Isaac, the child of promise, and the child of the flesh. And here you have a woman who's always going to be trying to earn favor. And the way she's going to be trying to earn favor is to produce children for Jacob. She keeps thinking, each time I produce a child for Jacob, his heart will turn towards me. Never does. And the fruitlessness of trying through works of the flesh to gain favor is very similar to what happens with folks who think that through the works of the flesh we can earn favor with God. That's not how it works. Now, if you notice here, all the way through here, in the first 3 sons that you see here, she bare a son, in verse 32, called his name Reuben. For she said, surely the Lord has looked upon my affliction, now therefore my husband will love me. Okay, and she conceived again and bare a son, and said, because the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. So each of these sons has the idea here, and then if you look, and she conceived again and bare a son, and said, now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Levi. Levi means join. Simeon means hear. And Reuben meant seen. The Lord has seen my affliction. The Lord has heard my calls. The Lord has now given me another son that will join my husband to me. All these works, she's trying to earn his favor, and it never works. But then you look at verse 35, and she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, now will I praise the Lord. See where her heart is here on this one? It's no longer trying to get the favor of her husband. It's looking to God and considering that what she is receiving, all good things, all perfect things, come from the Lord. And I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah. And at this point, she stops bearing children. So she called his name Judah. Now she's going to have more children later, but at this point she does stop. And it's interesting that God does look on this situation, and he always does the right thing, right? Leah was the woman that he married, and she is the one who's going through her. The line of Christ is going to come. Judah is going to be where Christ comes from. Now, it's going to be Joseph, the son of the favored woman, who's going to basically save them, and actually is more a type of Christ at this time. He's going to save the whole family, Joseph is. But at this time, you can see here that Leah now is surrendering to, in the naming of this child, to the grace and blessing and favor of God instead of trying to earn favor from man. Now let's look on, as we look on into chapter 30, now we see the battle of the wives. The battle of the wives. Oh, by the way, I did have a little story. I always try to pull out little stories, about being tricked into marrying someone. That it does happen. I found a story about a lady. Says, my husband is divorcing me because he found out that I used my position as his former secretary to cause a breakup with his old girlfriend, who was his one true love. They were happy together and really in love, and I know this because I used to spy on them. I used what I knew to drive a wedge between them with distortions and deception. A month ago, they got together for a heart-to-heart talk after their breakup and figured out I was the culprit behind it. My husband also knows that I don't love him at all. Isn't that amazing? So, how many people marry someone they don't really know? That's sad, isn't it? So important that in marriage, that there be a true, not just seeking the favor of the person you're wanting to marry, but of consulting the Lord and having that be a part of the marriage. But boy, what a story there. Now, how about this conflict in marriage? Two wives raising children. Well, in one of them raising children, the other one wanting children but can't have children. This is what happens here in chapter 30. Because it does say in verse 31 of 29, when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And so you have a situation here where it's not ingredients for a happy family. And how many women get involved with trying to seek the attention and favor of a man? It's kind of hard to understand. So these two women are fighting over this husband of theirs, and they battle. And all the way through this chapter 30, you're going to see these things popping up in this poor family. Verse 1, you see envy. Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children. Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, give me children or else I die. And so here comes another fleshly decision to try to fix this. Rachel gives her handmaid to Jacob. And so we start to get some more children. The 12 tribes of Israel, it's kind of interesting how they came to be. And then anger, verse 2. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel. He said, am I in God's stead, who hath withheld thee the fruit of the womb? Man, this is not pleasant. And you have, in verse 6, you have judgment. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan. This was Bilhah's son. Dan, his name comes means judge. And so she said, God's finally passing a good thing my way. Verse 8, and Rachel said, with great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed, and she called his name Naphtali. So again, Bilhah has a second son, and his name deals with wrestling. So you've got envy, anger, judgment, wrestling. This is the descriptions of the interactions of this family. I mean, if reality TV was around in these days, they would be on it. Right? Probably, yeah. Wrestler, a troop, verse 11. Leah said, a troop cometh. She called his name Gad because she decided to give Jacob her handmaid, Zilpah. And so now they're having a contest here. Okay, well, let's see, your handmaid had 2 children, so my handmaid's going to have some children. And the contest is afoot again. And back and forth they go. She says, I've got a troop. She had four kids already. Now she's adding a 5th through her handmaid. And verse 13, Leah said, happy am I, for daughter shall call me blessed, and she called his name Asher. Another blessing name she gives to Asher. But verse 22, and God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bare a son. And she said, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. So she finally has Joseph, and she said, Joseph means add or addition. And so God has added to her. And finally she has a son. But you can see the struggle and the battle. And the Bible teaches us also that the battle is always going on between what we would call grace and works. That's an application here we could probably make, that there's always a battle between grace and works, trying to find favor, trying to earn favor with God, instead of just receiving his blessing and receiving his favor. So many times we fall into these things of the flesh to try to earn favor and to earn blessing. And so you got this pull back and forth. I don't know if any of you remember this story, but again, you can see how God never intended for a man to have more than one wife. I mean, he did not make Adam, Eve, and Gertrude, and Harriet. He made Adam and Eve in the garden. And 1 Timothy 3:2, just some New Testament verses on this. 1 Timothy 3:2. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, aptitude. One qualifications of a pastor is that he be the husband of one wife, a one-woman man is what that means. And that's the way God meant it. Titus 1:6, again, another qualification given again in Titus chapter 1. If any be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. Again, when the qualifications again of a pastor are given, the mention of husband of one wife. And when you study even the qualifications of deacon and pastors, it's very clear that God's plan, and God's plan has been that it be the husband of one wife. That it be one woman, one man, married. That's what marriage is to be. Now today, our society has completely thrown the definition of marriage completely out. There is, our world our world knows better. You go out into the world, most places know what marriage is. If you go even into the tribal peoples, they may marry multiple women, but they know it's between a man and a woman. They know that. America, for some reason, has lost their footing on those things. Trying to be wise, professing themselves to be wise, they become fools. But I remember the story of David Livingstone when he first went into Africa. He led one of the tribal chiefs to the Lord. And this chief had multiple wives. But after he got saved, first thing he did was he moved out all of his multiple wives, moved back in his first wife, and he still took care of the other women, but he no longer considered himself married to them. He took back his first wife. And that's an unusual story, but it's very true, and I'm sure it's happened in other tribal cultures because we're getting to be a culture that's like that now. America and the world is getting to be that way. Just more hedonistic than actual with the Christian influence. Another verse, Ephesians 5:33. Ephesians 5:33. By implication, nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife, even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. You see no multitude of wives or husbands in those verses. And so husband and one wife is the way it was meant to be. I don't know if any of you remember this story. There was a lady who became an astronaut. She had reached the top of her field. She would operate the robotic arms, and she even flew in one of the space shuttles and operated the robot arm in the mission, and actually went into the space station and operated the robot arm in the space station on one of the many trips that the space shuttles made up into outer space. But maybe you remember this story. She drove from Houston to Orlando, Florida in 2007. She packed latex gloves, a black wig, a BB pistol, and ammunition, pepper spray, a hooded tan trench coat, 2-pound drilling hammer, black gloves, rubber tubing, plastic garbage bags, approximately $585 in cash, her computer, an 8-inch Gerber folding knife, and several other items before driving the 900 miles to Florida. Early police reports indicated she wore space diapers during the trip. She later denied wearing them. She went from Houston, drove straight to the Orlando International Airport, waited about an hour at the baggage claim, and then proceeded into the parking lot where she located and confronted another woman who had just arrived from Houston by plane. She said after arriving, she was aware of someone following her to the airport satellite parking area, and when she got into her car, she heard running footsteps. This is the lady who heard someone following her and quickly locked the door. This other lady ran up, slapped on the window, and tried to open the car door, asked for a ride, then started crying. The one lady rolled down her window a couple inches, and the lady sprayed pepper spray into her car. She was later arrested for attempted kidnapping and murder because they both were in love with another astronaut. The one lady was a captain in the Air Force, and this lady was an astronaut, and they both were in love with one guy. Throw a career away. Needless to say, she's no longer an astronaut. She's not even any longer she was also a member of the Navy. She was dishonorably discharged from the Navy. But just the terrible things that are brought on by not following God's way of putting things together. And that was true in this family as well. Look at verse 15, just a little bit of the interaction between these two sisters. Now remember, these are sisters. Verse 15. Is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? Is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? That's Leah saying that to Rachel. Well, the last point, just to finish up through verse 31 of chapter 30, the blessing and the blessed. So we had the well and the woman, the schemer and the schemer, the wife and the wife, and the favored and the unfavored, and now the last point is the blessing and the blessed. Look at verse 25. It came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said unto Laban, Send me away that I may go into mine own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service which I have done to thee. And so Jacob is ready now to break out on his own. He's got 11 kids. He's got 4 wives, kind of. He's got 2 wives and 2 handmaids who have played the wife. And Laban said unto him, Pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry. For I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for thy sake. Now you would say, this seems really strange, because Jacob has been no prize here. We see all the turmoil and drama that's in this family. And we see all the things but folks, this is life. Isn't it amazing that God reaches down and blesses us in spite of who we are and many times what we do? We are sinners. We make mistakes all the time. I've been listening in my devotions to the book of Leviticus. But the one thing, when you listen, I listen to it on my way in, because I drive, so I'm listening to Bible reading. And I managed to stay awake even with Leviticus playing. Leviticus is a hard book to listen to. But I tell you what you hear. If any man sin. If any man sin, if any man sin, if any man sin, because it's going through the offerings. And you know what he's saying? You all sin. You sin. And here's the other one. If any man sin in ignorance. That means a lot of times we're sinning and we don't even know it. And yet God's favor reaches down and he blesses us in spite of that. That's why Jesus came and died, to forgive us of our sin. Yeah, our desire should be like Jacob's desire. We love him so much that we serve him and we do not want to disfavor him. We do not want to fall into disfavor. We want to serve him and receive his blessing and not disobey his commands because we love him. We're not serving him like slaves and trying to keep a set of rules that keep us in his favor, because we can't be in his favor. That's why he put the sacrificial system in the Old Testament. And that's why in the New Testament Jesus came and finally paid the full price. Jesus paid it all so we could be forgiven. And we could receive his blessing and we could receive his favor. See, God was favoring Jacob, who was going to produce Judah, who was through Judah going to produce the Christ. And God is blessing Jacob, even in spite of all this turmoil, and in spite of all this that's going on in his family. And Laban, the schemer he is, can see that blessing. And isn't that what we're supposed to do? Just through our lives, show enough of the blessings of God working through us that other sinners who are in a similar situation could look at and say, God's blessing is on that person. God's blessing is on that family. God's blessing is on those people. God's blessing is on that church. God's blessing is on that school. God's blessing is on the ministries that reach out through this place. Now, that's what people should be seeing. Laban could see it by experience. I know it's a good thing. Jacob, to have you around because God blesses you. That's a testimony. Let's work, not work, let's seek God's favor and have him shining through us so people by experience will say when they come in contact with us, it's good to be around you because I can see God's hand is blessing you. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for the lessons we can see even in the mixed up world that is what is fallen. And Lord, fallen people, many times and sometimes trying to do what's right, many times scheming and not doing what's right, failing and falling after the flesh. But Lord, may we see that if we seek your favor and we look towards you and we can even see that you're the one that provides the good things of life and the blessings of life. Even as Leah learned these things, being in such a state where she realized she was not favored, yet she could receive your blessing. Lord, may we surrender the same way. Lord, may we realize and see that your plan is the best plan. The plans you have put down for marriage, the plans that you have put down for the way things should operate in the world. And Lord, so often the world wanders away from them and does not want anything to do with them. And yet, Lord, when they're followed, they are the right things. When they're not followed, Lord, there's chaos. May we see that. And then, Lord, may we see also that if we seek to let you work in us and through us and bless us, that it reaches out as a testimony to others. And they can, and Lord, may people start to see, yes, that's a place. If I go there, those people are blessed. Those people are blessed of the Lord. And may they seek you because they see Jesus in us. In his name we pray. Amen.